Want to get started. This is Profit First. And I love this topic, this book. Scott, you had told me in the very beginning that this was something that you've read already. Was a good read for you, I think you said last year. How many folks, quick show of hands, how many folks are familiar with Mike Michalowicz and this particular book, Profit First? Megan is, okay, some others, yes, no. You know, I'll tell you, if you don't know Michael Michalowicz, for starters, I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right, but I'm doing my best. Jersey guy, right? I think he's from the Caldwells. And to me, just one of the smartest business guys out there. And if you were to look over my shoulder and look at part of my book collection, Mike has probably a good chunk of that second shelf down of a lot of his books. He's got a lot of really good things to say about how businesses function and how they operate. This is one that I love, though. It's called Profit First. And I'll tell you, one of the things that we never teach you in school is how do you run a business so that you can become successful? I know, look, I teach the pre-licensing course, and I know what's in that content. And there's lots of stuff in there about everything. Nothing in there about how to run a successful, profitable business. So we're going to go through this, and we're just going to hit the high notes of this book. I would really encourage you to go and get a copy of this and put it in your bookshelf and read it. Mike is all over YouTube, and he's got a couple of good podcasts, I think. He is just one of those voices that I think is worth listening to in the business world today. If you have any questions around this is actually how you spell his name, Michalowicz. I think that's Irish. No, not really. So this is Mike. This is Profit First. And unmute and ask any questions that you have. We can really dig into this. Here's some interesting facts that he puts into the book that I think are kind of fascinating. 7% of the world's population will own an entrepreneurial small business at some point in their life. 7%. 93% are going to take the safe route and work in corporate America or do something else. Kudos to you guys, because if you're in this Zoom call and you are a real estate agent, you are in the 7% who've taken a chance to kind of be that entrepreneurial spirit. And yet it's not without some challenges. 7% of the population takes on the idea of being a small business owner. 83% of all businesses are in the United States are surviving check by check, transaction by transaction. And this was pre-COVID. This book was written in 2014. It was updated in 2017. I'm here to tell you, and I don't have to tell you, you know it. In a COVID environment, that number is higher. There are a lot of folks who are kind of on the edge right now. And, you know, one of the good news for us is in real estate, there's really still an opportunity to have a lot of success. When we went into lockdown in March of last year, and you guys who were here back then, remember, we got on those Ask Al Anything calls, and it was kind of circle the wagons in the very beginning. Oh my God, what's going to happen? Are we going to survive this? And yet for so many agents, what they found was 2020 was the very best year of their careers. You are fortunate to be in a business that there's always demand. There's always demand for what you do. People are always going to need a place to live. They may buy it, they may rent it, but no one on this planet does not need home and housing at some point in their lives. But we want to kind of get these numbers different. We want you to have a business that isn't living check by check. And so why do we even start a business in the first place? Let me ask you guys, what was the reason why you decided to become an entrepreneur or to start a career in real estate? I'm not so much looking for, I love houses and I love people. That's fine. What I'm really looking for is, why did you choose to kind of go out on your own? Anybody have some thoughts about what was driving them?
So I will say for me, I really wanted to be in control of my own destiny. The idea of like having to ask my boss for like a sick day or a vacation day, like just seemed very crazy to me at a young age. I had to ask another adult permission to be sick. So it was for me, you know, my parents had owned a business. So that was the only route that I saw. And I wanted control of my time. And then once you get into real estate, you realize that's probably the hardest things is controlling your time. But that was why I became my own boss.
Awesome. Anybody else?
I think for me, financial freedom, especially after the past year where I was working in, Fortune 500, I guess you could say, or working with Fortune 500, and it just stopped for the travel industry. And so now I'm like, well, I have the opportunity to create something of my own doing, be happy with it, as well as create a long-term profitable goal in real estate as well as beyond that.
Yeah. Awesome. Anybody else?
Yeah, I had a business of my own, fixing computers, and it wasn't very good because I wasn't great at marketing myself. And on top of that, I think that particular business is kind of saturated. So I was looking for something else to do, and this one seemed like it would be something that would teach me how to market, and maybe get me to owning a house in Hawaii. That would be good too.
Is that one of the big drivers for you, John, is to get that house in Hawaii?
Yes, it is. I'd really like to do that.
Yeah, you know what's on my bucket list is to come visit you, man. So I'm hoping to make that happen. Just so you know, get ready because I'm coming.
All right.
Look, I'll tell you, for me, it's a lot of the same stuff, right? For me, the job I had right before I got into real estate, I was in hospice care. I ran hospice programs, and I spent a lot of time with people who were kind of reflecting upon what was their life about. What did I achieve? What did I accomplish? And what I just felt was, look, life is short. You get one chance around this block. That's all you get. You get one shot. And I heard people talk about financial freedom. I heard people talk about independence, and all those things were really appealing for me. I'm not somebody who does really well kind of in a cubicle, right? In kind of a 9-to-5 thing. But here's the thing. We start businesses to do a couple things. We start a business to do things that make us happy, right? That life is short. We want to do things that make us happy. Keller Williams for a long time has had sort of a mantra of what do we believe as a company and what do we stand for, right? And one of the things that we've talked about for a long time is careers worth having, businesses worth owning, and lives worth living. Careers worth having is something that you just enjoy doing. Has anybody ever had a job that they did not love and lived through that experience? Right? That experience that happens like 7:00 at night, you start to feel it. You can hear the 60 minutes tick, tick, tick in the background. It's 7:00 and you can start to feel kind of the angel of death coming over you. It's like, oh my God, I got to go back there again. Right? That's no way to live. Right? A career worth having is something that brings you joy. A business worth owning is one that gives you profit. If we're not making money in our business, it's not worth owning. If you're running a business and it's not generating profit, stop, reevaluate, and decide, is this the right business for me? And guys, I'm going to tell you, there is no failure in reevaluating some of your business choices and saying, this isn't the one. I had made that decision back in my early 40s, and I decided that the role that I had, that this wasn't the thing for me. And I got into real estate, have had some success in real estate, but all along the way, I have started other businesses. Some of them are going still today and doing well. I've started other businesses that have completely crashed and burned. There's no failure in saying, this isn't right, I want to change gears. The failure is sticking to something that's wrong and trying to make it right, trying to make it work. The way that we do business, to do things that make us happy, to generate financial freedom. But here's the thing you got to understand. You can't do either one without profit. You're not going to be happy if your business isn't profitable. And you sure as hell won't have financial freedom or any kind of freedom unless you've got profit in your business. One of the mistakes that we make is we think the moment I become my own boss, I'm free. And what you learn, sometimes through other people's wisdom and sometimes the hard way, is you're not free until you've got money coming in. And until there's money coming in, you are just constantly on, and that's no way to live. So let's take a look. What is the purpose of business and what is your mission? And I love these conversations that Mike talks about in this book. He says, look, the mission of every great business is to do something that matters. The mission of every great business is to make an impact in the world. right? And that's something that we've got to think about. We have one time to go around this block. Where can I do something that makes a difference? But our mission and our purpose in business are different. The purpose of business is to make an impact. The purpose of business is to generate profit. Because if we don't generate profit, the business can't survive and the mission can't be accomplished. Profit makes the mission sustainable. And so when we start to think, and we talk all the time in this company about what's my big why? What am I playing for? Who is depending on me? What impact do I want to make in the world? What is the reason why I'm going to do things that maybe don't seem so comfortable to do sometime? What am I playing for? If we don't have profit, that dream just isn't sustainable. So there is a core belief that Mike has in this book that I really love. And if anybody's read it before and wants to chime in, I'd love to hear your perspectives on this as well. But one of the core beliefs that Mike has is that every business that's generating revenue has profit somewhere inside of it that's waiting to be extracted. If you're bringing money in, there will be profit. Now, the question becomes, how do we generate that profit? How do we structure things to make sure that there's profit? There's no possibility of profit if there's no revenue, but any business generating revenue has profit inside of it that's waiting to be released. Let's talk about running a business for a second. What businesses don't do is they don't run out of your family's checking account, right? We don't run our businesses out of our checking account. My hope for you, and we're going to talk about what accounts do you need to have to be a business. Too many agents are still kind of playing a little bit as hobbyists. They get a commission check, they put it right in their family's checking account, and off they go. It was a big eye-opener for folks back in March and April of last year, when suddenly were people looking to apply for some PPP loans, some payroll protection loans, and some assistance during this pandemic. And what happened is a lot of that level of assistance was happening at your local banks. And you went to your local bank and said, hey, I need some assistance here because I can't work. My business has gone belly up because of the pandemic, and I'm going to apply for a loan. And they said, you don't have an account here. Oh, no, I do. It's my family's checking account. Oh, no. If you're going to apply for a PPP loan, you need to have a business account. And you don't have one, right? That was very disappointing for a lot of folks. Businesses run with business accounts. They don't run through their family checking account. They have separate bank accounts. They have separate credit cards, right? They just kind of keep that stuff all kind of aligned. You know, we could have a conversation a different day as to whether or not it makes sense to incorporate or not incorporate, and there's pros and cons of each. But businesses have separate budgets and they have a separate books. They just run everything as a separate business entity. And they follow proven models. At the end of the day, at Keller Williams, we're always talking about systems and models because Gary Keller believes, and he's learned this through lots of different mentors throughout his life, that people have lived before us and success leaves clues. And there's really no reason to try to figure, like, you got to make it up and figure it out. There are people who've lived before us and there are proven models. Now, here's a model that a lot of us have learned. And it's the traditional model of accounting. And here's the accounting formula. It says revenues minus expenses equals profit. And that's the way businesses operate. I have money coming in. I pay the bills. Whatever's left over is profit. And when you think about how Keller Williams operates, some of you know this, some of you may not. We run a very unique business model. Most businesses run their books on an annualized cycle. I open the books at the beginning of the cycle, at the beginning of the year. I close the books at the end of the year, and then I roll over to next year's accounting cycle. Keller Williams closes its books every month. Every month. Because of our profit sharing program, what we do is we have commission money that comes in. That's the revenue. We pay all the expenses, which is the agent commission, all the bills that we've got. We close the books every single month. There is not a penny of corporate debt that carries from month to month, because at the end of the month, whatever's left in this formula is profit, and we choose to share it. And so this model of revenue minus expenses equals profit is what we've always learned and always been taught in business. Here's the thing about that model that Mike challenges in this book. He says, you know, here's what human nature is like. Things that come last sometimes are seen as the least important. And things that come first are the things that we put our attention to and the things that we get done. We say sometimes in bold or some other classes, what you focus on expands. The thing that you put your energy on, the reason why we have our vision boards is because the things that I put my energy into and I pay attention to, I'm more likely to manifest. The things that we just don't really think much about, maybe they happen, maybe they don't. What comes last oftentimes gets ignored. Let's go back to this formula here for a second. What comes last in this formula? Revenue minus expenses equals profit. The very last part of that equation is profit. And if we put profit in the last part of that equation, it's not the thing we're focusing on. It's the thing that happens if we're lucky, if we've got enough revenue, if we didn't have too much expenses. And so what profit is described sometimes as the bottom line or year end, and it's the last thing that we think about. And so how many of you have ever had a business that while you weren't looking, you're so busy focusing on generating more revenue that your business becomes kind of a cash-eating monster? That's what Mike calls. In fact, the subtitle of the book, Profit First, if you can read that on the screen, transform your business from a cash-eating monster to a money-making machine. Too many of our businesses, we work really hard, and at the end of the cycle, we don't have enough to show for it. Parkinson's law. Let's talk about that. What's Parkinson's law? Well, it's interesting. Parkinson's law is a time management law. And here's what Parkinson's law says. It says that work expands to fill the time available for its completion. So for example, if I wanted to clean out the basement and I had a whole week to do it, how long do you think it's going to take me to clean the basement? It's going to take me a whole week because that's how much time I've allotted to it. If I allotted 3 days, it would take me 3 days. If I allotted 1 day, I figure out how to get it done in 1 day. Parkinson's law says that work tends to expand to fill the available time that we've given for its completion. And what Mike does here is he takes Parkinson's law and he starts to think about it differently. He starts to think about expenses and the amount of money that we have to spend. And here's what he says. Our expenses expand to eat up all of the available funds that exist in our operating account. If I've got $10,000 in my operating account, how much am I going to spend? It's going to be $10,000. If I've got $5,000 in the operating account, how much am I going to spend? It's going to be whatever is in that bucket. That's human nature. Just the same way that work expands to fill the time allowed, our expenses tend to go to the limit our available resources. And when we put limits on our operating account, what we learn how to do is to live within our means. Have any of us ever had to learn to live within a budget? Quick show of hands, right? Right? Look, we all have, right? And so when you have a budget and you've got an unlimited amount of money, you're not very disciplined. When you've got a limited amount of money, you are very disciplined. My grandmother used to have a system where she had a whole bunch of different envelopes. And at the beginning of the month, when she got the money that she had to live on for the month, she put some of it in the food envelope. She put some of it in the utilities envelope. And when the envelope was empty, the money was gone. When you put a lid on that envelope, it causes you to make different kinds of decisions. And so scarcity causes us to really focus. When you have limited time, you're more purposeful in your activities. When you've got a limited number of calories in a day, if you're trying to lose weight, you get purposeful about what you put in your body. Scarcity creates focus. And so here's the thing that Mike asked us to focus on. We've got to think about our expenses in two different kinds of categories. There are things that are non-negotiable. And then there are things that really are negotiable. And on the non-negotiable side, profit is a non-negotiable. I am not leaving it to chance. Profit is non-negotiable. Our income is non-negotiable. We're going to talk about the difference between the two in a moment. Having money to pay the taxes, as much as we don't want to do it, is a non-negotiable, guys. You don't get to opt out. What is negotiable is what we spend. Our operational overhead is where we get to make choices. So when we think about expense categories in these two ways, non-negotiable and negotiable, it gives us an opportunity to change the traditional accounting formula to one that says revenue minus the profit leaves us the amount of money that we have to spend. Revenue coming in minus the predetermined amount of profit that we're taking out of our business leaves us the operating account, and it gives us a sense of how much do we have to spend. Do you see how this formula feels really different? Give me some thoughts about this formula while I take a sip of water here. Everybody's muted. I see some mouths moving, but I'm not hearing a thing.
It's similar to the old saying, pay yourself first, and and then make sure you pay whatever bills you need to pay.
It's exactly what it's like, right? Anybody familiar with the idea of tithing?
Yep.
In certain religious traditions, right, one of the things that they tell us is to say, look, take 10%, traditionally it's 10% of what you have, and give it to the place where you're getting your spiritual support, and learn how to live within the confines of the rest of what's left, right? It's the same kind of idea. Pay yourself first. That's exactly what we're talking about here. And so what we have to have is a revenue allocation model. Revenue has to be part of the equation, because within any business that's generating revenue, there's profit hidden. But no absent revenue, there is no possibility for profit. What we have to do is have a model that tells us, how do I allocate the revenue when it comes in? And so what Mike suggests in the book is that we create different bank accounts that we allocate our revenue into in this order. Multiple bank accounts. Number one is the profit account. If I want to make sure that I'm profitable, what you focus on expands. The things that we don't pay attention to, the things that come last are an afterthought. The things that come first are the focus of our attention. The very first thing we're going to do is determine how much profit am I going to take out of my business. We have to have a separate account to put our profit into. We need a payroll account. And we're going to unpack each one of these. We need a payroll account because profit and payroll are not the same thing. You need to pay yourself, just like any other business would pay the chief executive officer of that business. You've got to pay yourself. Now, you've got to pay yourself what the role is worth. We'll talk about that. You need a payroll account. You need a tax account, a bucket that you put the money aside to pay the IRS when the time comes. And then finally, you have an operating account. And so what Mike suggests is you have 4 different accounts that you take your revenue when you get your commission checks, when you get your revenue coming in, and you put a certain amount of it into each one of these buckets. Let's start with profit versus payroll, because this is where a lot of us get tripped up if we're running our business out of our family's checking account. We treat everything as it's payroll. I got this check. I put it in the bank. Look at that. I just got paid. Woohoo. No, wait a second. Here's what happens. Profit is not payroll. Profit is the reward in business for shareholders' investment and risk-taking. Now, who's taking the risk in your entrepreneurial business? That would be you. You probably don't have a whole... Now, if you're married, your spouse could be kind of joining you on this risk. There is, I'm telling you, my wife is going to be canonized a saint. She may be the very first Presbyterian woman ever to be canonized a saint. But when I walked away from a massive 6-figure job in a healthcare system, one of the plum positions in the state, to take this risk of becoming an entrepreneur, that was a huge risk for her too, right? But profit is not payroll. Profit is the reward that you get for taking the risk and succeeding in that endeavor. Payroll is what you pay someone, probably you, to operate the business. And they're different, right? Do we see the difference in the two? Now you got to develop the habit of being profitable. And in the very beginning, what we're going to do is pay ourselves first. In a startup business, we know that what comes first is the thing that's most important. In the growth phase of your business, you have to be realistic. It takes money to build momentum when you're starting out. It takes money to get started. And a lot of people who have built very successful businesses will tell you that in the very beginning, they might not have even taken much payroll of themselves at all, because all the revenue that they had, they poured back into the business. I understand that. However, I also understand the importance of developing habits. There's another book behind me by a guy named James Clear called Atomic Habits. That's another really good read. And we've got to develop the habit of creating profit. In the very beginning, because you do need revenue to go back into your business, you're not going to put a huge chunk in that profit account each month. Maybe it's 1%, maybe it's 0.5%, but it's got to be something. Because if we don't do it consistently, we're not going to develop the habit. I have a buddy of mine who's a physical trainer. He's a physical therapist and he's a trainer. And he works at a rehab place not too far from me. That's also a gym open to the public. It's a part of the Robert Wood Johnson system. It's a great place. Here's what he says. He does a lot of training of athletes, high school, college athletes. And periodically, athletes get an injury. They can't perform. And what he insists is that if they can't train, they still have to suit up and come to the gym. Because it's the habit of getting in motion and doing the task. Even though, because you're injured and you're nursing this injury, I'm not going to ask you to lift, but I am going to ask you to get suited up and get your butt here to the gym. And we're not going to break that habit. This is kind of the same way. In the beginning, even if it's $1, we've got to be putting some money into the profit account. And then as you've got more revenue coming in, scale that up, right? Scale that up. But here's the thing. You can't take that profit and put it back into your business. So choose wisely. Make sure that whatever you're going to use as profit is truly going to be profit. It's tempting. It's tempting sometimes to say, you know what, I've got this opportunity. If I invest in here, or maybe revenue was lean this month, and in order to do something I want to do, I'm going to have to pull the money out of my profit account and put it into the business. Don't do it. Don't do it. In fact, what Mike would say is put your profit account in an entirely different financial institution. Because if you have it all in the same bank, it's really easy to get on the app and just transfer money from one account to another. But if you're in a totally different bank, it ain't so easy to do that. And so he says, just know that you're going to be tempted to take your profit and roll it back into your business, put it in an entirely different bank. So there's a speed bump there. And I think there's some genius in that. But start small and scale up. The second account is payroll. You got to pay yourself a salary and make sure that you pay yourself what the role is worth. But also don't overpay yourself either. Pay yourself the same that you would pay somebody else to run your business. Just as a benchmark, I did a quick search online and I came up with a statistic that I thought was interesting. The median CEO running a company between 10 and 15 million in revenue earns about 53% of the compensation of the median CEO income of somebody running $100 million to $250 million business, right? It's scaled up proportionately. And one of the things that we have to understand is if I'm running a $20,000 real estate business, I can't get paid the same amount as if I'm running a $20 million real estate business, right? We've got to be realistic. If you weren't doing this business, if you weren't running it, what would you pay somebody to run it? And the bottom line is you're going to pay more based on the revenue generated, right? That makes sense. But pay yourself a salary. And then once you've put some of your money, the revenue coming in, some of it goes into the profit bucket, some of it goes into the payroll account. Here's the thing you got to understand. If your business can't afford to hire you, you do not have a sustainable business. You have a cash-eating monster on your hands. And that's just something. So in the very beginning, be clear. You're not getting paid a lot. We get that whole big $15,000 commission check. We put it in our checking account. We think that's all of our profit. No, it's not, right? The tax account is important, and it's particularly important this time of year when we start thinking about taxes. How much should we be putting aside for taxes? Does anybody have a benchmark number that you use? Everybody's muted right now.
I do 25%.
25%. Okay, I heard another number. What was this? Stephanie, were you muted when you said something, or did I?
No, I said 40%.
About 40%. Okay. Anybody else have a number?
Yeah, I do 35.
And the bottom line is there's not a right number. It's what's the right number for you based on what your financial tax professional people tell you. However, we've got to make sure that we've budgeted properly, because we've got to account for a couple different types of taxes. We've got to pay for federal tax. That's Uncle Sam. We've got to pay for our local taxes, right? Our state taxes. The thing we have to remember is that we also have, as independent contractors, something that's called self-employment tax. And what is self-employment tax? That's the tax that in the corporate world is kind of covered to some degree by your employer. That's the tax that pays for things like your Social Security when you retire, so you can continue to contribute so that when you retire, you have Social Security. It covers Medicare when you retire. And does anybody know what the current tax rate in the United States is for self-employment tax?
15%.
15.3%, Danielle, right on the money. 15.3% of your revenue is going to self-employment taxes. It would not be doing that if you worked for a big corporation, because they would be paying a big chunk of that. 12.4% goes to Social Security, 2.9% goes to Medicare. If we need 15.3% for self-employment tax, plus federal tax, plus state tax, just make sure that you budget accordingly. We always say, as a safety net, when we're coaching at Keller Williams, start with 40% as a big, broad number, and then go to your tax professionals and have better guidance. Most of the time, the guidance comes down to 25, 30 something range. But you got to cover all those things. And here's the thing. Put the money aside first. One of the things that happens in sales is people who are really good at generating revenue learn that they can always generate revenue, and they can amp it up and they can amp it down as they need to. And what happens a lot of times is that people get this revenue coming in, they spend it all because they treated it like payroll. They spent it all and they didn't put any aside for the taxes, because they know that they can just turn on that switch and make another deal come together, and they'll take that revenue later. That's a dangerous game. I know.
What I always suggest, I put it in an interest-bearing account like Ally, and so I don't see the money at all, and it actually forms interest in the meanwhile. So that's what I do. And I take 40% and I put it away. And then in my mindset, if there's anything left over, it goes into my savings account. But at least I have more money than less.
I love the way you think. Put it in an interest-bearing account and get it out of your sight. You know, I grew up, my mom, we didn't have a lot of money growing up. I mean, we were loved, we were safe, we were well-fed. We didn't have much money. Yet my mother always had money for Christmas. And the bank had something called a Christmas club. And she had a little coupon book, and every month, or I don't know exactly how often she paid into it, but on regular intervals, she just put money aside into this little account that they called the Christmas Club. And when it came to November, whatever it was, they gave her this money, and now she could go shop for presents. But she didn't see it all year long. And she wasn't tempted to spend it all year long, just the way you're describing it, Danielle. And if you're smart like you are, put it in an interest-bearing account, but get it out of your sight, because it's got to be there when you need it. When are your taxes due? Let's get clarity around this. Do you know when your taxes are due in the United States?
Ours is different than personal, I believe. I mean, I'm told to pay quarterly, which I hate doing, but isn't it April 15th is tax day?
Okay, I've got quarterly, I've got April 15th. Both of those are on the table. Anybody else know when your taxes are due?
Well, you've got it on the screen, when it's earned.
I knew somebody would read the screen. Yeah, when it's earned. The IRS says as soon as you get paid, you owe us. And in corporate America, they get it that way, because your tax, your payroll administrator is going to take some of that away and send it. And so you don't have to think about it. The truth is, the law says the money is due when it's earned. However, with so many people working in small independent businesses, it is just too complicated, too many moving parts. They can't have you send a check to them every time you get a commission. They can't be processing a check every time you get a commission. So they say, look, let's just estimate this, and we'll do it quarterly. We'll just estimate it, do it quarterly, and then once a year on the 15th of April, we're going to balance the ledgers. You're going to send all your documents in. We're going to see how it turns out, and if there's any final adjustments, we'll make them then. But yeah, the money is owed when it's due, so put it aside. Make those payments quarterly. If you don't make those payments quarterly, you will have to adjust at the end in a big lump sum at the end. And maybe you've put that money aside and you can still carry it, but you're probably going to pay a penalty fee for not paying it when it was due to them, which was quarterly. Okay. But put it aside, right? Put it in a tax account. I can tell you, I know too many agents, nobody on this call, thank God. At least I hope not. I know too many agents who are in real legitimate trouble with the IRS, like six-figure trouble. That is not the kind of trouble you want to have. So don't spend your tax money with the belief that you're going to earn it back, even if you're great at making revenue happen. Determine what you need to put in the account, allocate it there, and what you're left with now. After you've put money in your profit account, after you put money in your payroll account, after you put money in your tax account, what you're left with is your operating revenue. And once the non-negotiables are calculated, now what's left is this totally negotiable category, which says, how much money do I have to spend on my business? And this is your budget. You may want to put the money into your operations account, which is probably going to be a business checking account. You may want to put it there and then allocate out from there, right? Because you've got to deposit it somewhere. It makes sense probably to deposit it here and then allocate into profit, allocate into payroll, allocate into tax accounts. It makes sense to keep profit somewhere else, so write the check. But this is the budget. Parkinson's law revisited says our expenses expand to eat up all the available funds in this operating account. If we limit on the front end, we'll learn to live within our means. And it'll cause us to do a couple things. When we limit our operating account, we learn to live within our means. It helps us get focused and prioritized. When you're living on a budget, you make real different choices than when budget's not an issue. Can we agree that this is true? Right? And it's any kind of budget. For those of you who are blessed with a fast metabolism and a good body shape, you don't have to worry about the calories you put in. When you get to be near 60 like me and you're a little overweight, you got to count those calories. When you have an unlimited budget, you make different choices than you do when you've got a limited budget. It also causes you to get focused on prioritizing. Think about the day before you go on vacation and how focused you are. I've got to do this first. I got to do this second. I got to do this third. When you have a limited amount of money in your operating account, you've got to decide the 80-20 rule. What's the most important thing that I have to spend? What is driving my business and having the most success? What investment is yielding the best return in terms of my return on investment for lead generation? I've got to track my expenses and see what's working and spend the money accordingly. It also forces you to get creative. How can I do things differently? Right? How can I do things differently? It causes us to become very clear. One of the big things that happened when we all went into lockdown in March of last year was everyone who was running a real estate business or any other kind of business got real clear on what could go and what couldn't go. What we had to do right out of the gate was to start to jettison all of those ancillary expenses that when we're kind of running fat and happy, everything is good. But when money is tight, do I really need this subscription? Do I really need, right? We've got to make those clear decisions. You know, one of the things that we were challenged to do in one of the Ask Al calls was just to open up your phone, go to your iTunes account and start to see, do you have any recurring subscriptions in there that are just kind of getting done again and again and again? You don't even pay any attention to them. I'm like, no, we don't have any of those. Wait, what? Who subscribed to this magazine? I said to my wife, do you ever read this magazine? I didn't even know we had that subscription. Looks like we've been paying for it for 3 years. Guys, that happens. You know, we talk about businesses having their own bank accounts and their own credit cards. There's a guy named Matt Fedek, who is an operating partner in I think in the Maryland area somewhere. But I remember him saying one time that, he puts on his business expenses on a certain credit card and regularly, like once a year, he just cancels that card. And I said, that's crazy. Why would you cancel that card? All those recurring expenses. Now I got to get a new credit card. I got to give it to all those different vendors. And his point was, look, what I do is I put a new credit card because it automatically stops payments every single month for all these recurring expenses. And I can come back and reevaluate, is this something that I want to continue to do? Or is this something that I need to revisit and rethink about? Living lean, limiting your resources causes you to have that kind of clarity, and I'd encourage you to do that. So with that, that's the highlights of this book. And I'd love just to have a couple minutes of conversation and discussion. What have you thought about your business this way before? Some of you've read the book. Let's talk a little bit about what would it be like to really try to live your business life this way. I'd love some feedback on what you're hearing today.
I would probably find that I have more profit than I end up with, because I know that there are definitely expenses. I actually wrote it down this morning. I need to reevaluate in terms of what I'm really using, what I'm not. And if you keep it to the minimum, just like a household budget, you find that you have more at the end of the day and you don't miss what you gave up.
It's exactly the truth, right? You don't really miss what you gave up. You'll learn how to live within it, right? What else?
Yeah, along those lines, Hal, so to me, this book was all about, right, we're all at Keller Williams, and Keller Williams is built on the idea of running a business on systems and models, right? So this gave me a system for keeping track of my money and allocating it where it needed to be. Whereas I felt like before this book, I was pretty good on my budget. I had a couple different accounts set up, but what I found was that, I would shift money as I needed it here. Time to pay the tax bill. I'll pull some money, put it over into this account. And this just really systemized, money comes in, and now twice a month, I log on to my online banking portal, and I know, okay, 25% allocated to tax, 25% is going to my OpEx account, 40% goes to my compensation, which now creates my household budget out of that. And what I found interesting was that he talks about that idea of like starting out no matter what, by rewarding yourself with, even if it's just that dollar of profit every time you receive that check. And then he said, as you work the system moving forward, you're going to start to see things pop up in your budget that, allow you to realize, hey, you know what? My owner comp is, that account is increasing more than I can even spend on a monthly basis. Time to up my profit percentage. So you really start to adapt with the plan in place. And it's really just, I don't know, so simple, but so rewarding.
It's funny. I felt the same way, Scott, when I first read it. I'm like, how come I didn't think of this? This is not that complicated, right? And the truth is, some of the smartest ideas in the world are the ones that are just so in plain sight that we don't see them.
Well, what was funny too is that last year also read Richest Man in Babylon. And in reading that, I was like, some of these ideas are just core concepts that have been written about years ago, and yet someone applies them just the right way, and it makes that light bulb go off, right?
Right. Every generation thinks they thunk of it for the first time, right?
Yeah.
It's just that simple. It's just that simple. It's a habit, though, right? Scott, when you first started doing this, just like any other habit formation, it probably took a bit of adjusting to get used to, correct?
Absolutely. I mean, first thing I did was, if it wasn't in the calendar, it didn't exist. So I put on my calendar on the 10th and the 25th of every month. I think that was something that came as a suggestion out of the book was, find your 2 dates. And I think there was some purpose behind those dates. But however it was, those were the 2 dates that went into my calendar as profit first distribution days. So I knew my calendar would remind me, go into the bank account. Did I have any commission checks hit that first income account where the money flows into? And then I just dispersed from there. And, it created the habit because it was in my calendar. And then now I just, without even thinking about it, I log into my account on those dates and know that I get to have some fun moving money around.
And I'm gonna tell on myself a little bit here, because even though I've read this and even though I've taught this for a long time, I haven't always done it. And I in the past 3 to 5 years or so, I opened up 3 different LLCs, 3 different businesses, and 2 of them I did it this way, and 1 of them I didn't. And the business that I didn't run this way was not as profitable as it needed to be. It was not as profitable as it could have been. And, with COVID, I actually, unfortunately did end up shuttering 2 of those businesses. But the one that I've kept, it's sort of a coaching and consulting business I do outside of what I do in the real estate world. But I've been operating the business this way, and it really, really runs seamlessly once you've got the habit, right? Once you've learned the habit.
And have you noticed, Hal, any adjustments that you've made with your percentages as you kind of grow and learn the system behind it?
Yeah, it is just that. For me, it's the profit. I started conservative on profit because I had the belief that I needed more operating money for marketing purposes and some other kinds of professional services that I needed, and creating websites and creating different kinds of things. But now that is happening and the revenue is coming more consistently, now I up the percentage that's going right into profit. And remember, profit isn't payroll. Profit is the reward for taking the risk, right? That's what profit is. It's the reward for taking the risk to start this business venture. And you can spend it just like you can spend payroll. You can do a lot of things with it. But that's been the adjustment for me, is kind of watching that percentage of profit start to creep up, which feels nice.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's rewarding as well in the fact that, I've learned to live on my owner's compensation account. And so, yeah, that money sitting in the profit account can be used on anything, whether you want to go out and buy an investment property, or whether you just want to go treat yourself to a nice dinner. It's play money at that point.
It is. It's totally house money, but avoid the temptation, and Mike is real clear about this. Avoid the temptation when things get lean to plow that back into the business. It's always easy to say, well, I didn't want to do this, but I got to rescue the business. You know what's going to happen if you don't do that is you're going to learn how to become more creative with what you have.
Mm-hmm.
You will. What other questions, thoughts, feedback in the last couple of minutes that anybody has about this one?
I read the book the same time as Scott, only Hal, you know me, I'm very stubborn. I did not implement it.
Shocking.
So yeah, of course, shocking that I didn't do it because I have to be stubborn. But it is something that I am implementing for this calendar year. So I'm like a little jealous because now when Scott goes to file his taxes, like he'll be able to have that conversation with his accountant, make adjustments. And now he's already a year ahead into really narrowing down those numbers to be exactly what his business is. And what I thought was very interesting is somebody else who read the book with, Pete Kopech, he has investment properties. He actually applied this concept to his income coming from investment properties. So like finding a way to set aside profit, to have owner comp, and that way like you're kind of protecting your investments just like a business. And that's a concept that I would have never thought to apply to an income property. And I thought that was genius.
Yeah, it really is. You mentioned something that I just want to touch on before we wrap, and is you really need to get your CPA on board. I couldn't sell it to the CPA that I had worked with for a while. And I said, look, I want to implement it this way. And I talked about this to different accounts, whatever. He's like, no, we're not doing that. We're going to do it this way. I said, no. This is the way I want to do it. No, we're not doing it that way. Well, he's no longer my CPA. Ooh. And I want somebody who's on board with this, because if there's an alignment with the whole team pulling in this direction, if the channels are all supported with everyone on the team, it is going to work well. It's going to work well.
How did you find an accountant that was willing to do that with you? Because they give recommendation in the book, but I was curious, like, did you have to find a few, or was it just a one-off that person was kind of being stubborn as well?
I think it was just a one-off. I don't know. I mean, he was a good accountant, but he was a jerk, kind of. So I won't say his name.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So we're independent contractors. We get paid to our name and not our business.
Correct.
So I just ordered the book, so I'll be reading it soon, like Megan, and catching up with everyone else. But so when I get paid, I put it to my business account. Mm-hmm. And so when I pay taxes, I'm paying the taxes out of my business name or my name.
Your business is your name, right? You're going to be Holly Andrews Realtor. You're going to file as unless you incorporate and become an LLC or something like that, which we could talk about at another time. But what's going to happen is you're going to file your personal income taxes, and your real estate business is going to be sort of a Schedule C attachment. It's all going to be part of your personal income taxes. Now, I will tell you that businesses get taxed at a preferable rate. When you're paying your personal income taxes, you're paying taxes on a personal income level. Businesses are taxed differently. There is sometimes some tax benefits to thinking about becoming an LLC. or maybe even an S Corp. I'm not going to advise you because I don't know what's best for you, but there are some folks who find that by incorporating, they can file taxes at a discounted tax structure and have to put less aside. But we pay you in the state of New Jersey only to you, the person. State of New Jersey does not allow us to pay you an LLC. So if you owned an LLC, if you decided to create your real estate business and it was called Holly Andrews Kick You Know What Real Estate Business LLC, you can't get the MCA to write a check to that company name.
Right.
It's going to be made to you, and you're going to put it into the operating account of that business because you're the principal owner. And from there, you're going to allocate it out into those other accounts. And when the time comes to pay your taxes, the tax account will have the ability to either wire money to the IRS or write a check to the IRS.
Okay.
Right? Does that make sense?
Yes. Thank you.
Scott, how do you do it? Is your tax account a checking account, or do you wire money? How do you do it?
To be honest, you're stumping me there. I went to a local bank and was able to I set up 5 accounts with them. I believe my tax and my profit are savings accounts. And then when it comes time to pay my taxes, I transfer it.
Transfer it back into operations.
Yeah, just so it can go out from there.
Yeah.
Everything is in your name, not an LLC.
Yeah, correct. As of right now, I haven't, ventured into forming an LLC or S Corp for, my real estate business. Right. Maybe that's the next step.
That's what I did. I did an S Corp LLC. That's how I file. And the tax account that I was talking about in the interest bearing account, if it's like the IRS and I can pay online, then I'll just pay it directly from that account. But like I do business in New York and New Jersey. So sometimes like if they need a check, then I'll just take the money out of that account and then put it into my primary so I could write out a check and mail it. But what I do is I have all of my commissions go into my business account. I deposit in there and then I'll transfer it into my personal account. So everything is being documented in my business account.
Yeah. It's a great way to do it. And again, there isn't a specific right way exactly. It's what works, but the idea of having the different buckets, right? And how do you fund these different buckets so the money is being utilized the way that it needs to be? That's the game. So good stuff. I'm happy to hear that there's so many business savvy folks that are already thinking about this. So for those of you that haven't read Profit First, go ahead and read it. It's a fun read. Mike is a lot of fun to read. He's a lot of fun to listen to. He's a Jersey guy. He can be appropriately irreverent at times. And this is one of his great ones. I'm looking right now on some of his other books. Fix This Next is another one of his. The Toilet Paper Entrepreneur. That's one of his first ones. I'll let you figure that one out on your own. He's got a lot of great titles and he's got a lot of great insights. But I think this one for us as real estate agents can really be one of the most important ones in terms of how to make sure that in any business that's bringing revenue in, there is profit if you protect it first, right? So with that, guys, we kept you a little bit after class today, but I hope it was worth your while. Good to see you guys today, and I look forward to seeing you guys again real soon.